Does it take more faith to stay in the boat or to walk on water? Maybe that's an unfair question, but I think it's something we need to ponder today. At first glance, it would appear to be an incredible accomplishment of faith to step out of a boat with the expectation that you could walk atop the water. But as some commentators have pointed out, from the very beginning, the writer of the Gospel of Matthew offers subtle clues that perhaps Peter was motivated by something other than tremendous faith. Maybe getting out of the boat was the action of little faith. It's been a long day for Jesus. Feeding 20,000 people will do that to you. Jesus sends the disciples out. It's a common phrase in the Gospels, Jesus sending, directing. And then, rather than getting in the boat with the disciples, Jesus goes up the mountain to pray by himself. And I see in that brief mention in the Gospel a reminder of how important our self-care is, how important our prayer life with God is, to spend time in prayer away from the rigors of the day, to sit in the presence of God, to be refreshed and renewed. This is a timely reminder at this time of year. Rest and renewal is built into the very framework of creation. Some would argue that the crown of creation is humans, but others say no, the crown of creation is Sabbath rest, not human beings. God, with humanity and the whole of creation, enters into God's rest on the seventh day. And Jesus goes off by himself to pray. When evening came, the disciples are in the boat and a storm bears down upon them. They are far from land. They have been rowing all night. They are not getting anywhere. The wind is against them. They are exhausted. Many of these disciples are trained fisherfolk. They know how to handle a boat, but not this boat, not this time. Early in the morning, in that ethereal, mystical time, a time before sunrise, when they are tired but not really awake, but not asleep either, when they're in between the shadows of night and the rays of hope in the morning. And it is there at this liminal moment in time that Jesus comes walking to them on the water. The disciples see Jesus, although they do not know it is Jesus. And they are terrified. They cry out in fear. And then the words, the holy, gracious words, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." What those words do to us. In the midst of fear, a voice that says, "I am with you." In the midst of the struggles of life and the challenges we face, we hear a voice that says, I am with you to the end of the age." Peter calls out, "If it is you," and Jesus says, "Come." That's it. One word. That's all that Peter needs. One word. Not like the 3 words of denial that he speaks a short time later in the gospel. No, just one word. And Peter steps out of the boat and he walks toward Jesus. Now, we don't know how Jesus said that word. Does Jesus say it with that calm, reassuring voice, "You can do it, it's okay"? Or is it said with a rolling of eyes and a note of exasperation in his voice? "Just once, Peter, couldn't you be less impetuous and stay in the boat?" We're not sure how Jesus said it. But Peter looks down, and Peter feels the storm buffeting him, and he starts to sink. But Jesus reaches out like he's always reaching out, a hand, a gesture, a word, grace, care, love. This is an amazing story. It's otherworldly. And we, scientifically sophisticated that we are, ponder and wonder and have no answer for what this means from a physics point of view. And that is okay, because this is not a physics lesson. The intent of the story is to draw us in and ask, who is this? We come to the story with the question, what does this mean for us? And further, what did this story mean for the community in which the writer of Matthew lived, a community buffeted by the waves of persecution and hardship? Matthew's community wonders where Jesus is. Why does it seem like he's forgotten about them when their situation is so desperate? Matthew's listeners could easily have identified with the disciples in the boat. Weary and afraid of death, like sailors who have fought a storm all night, Matthew's community may have begun to lose faith, may have started to become weary, and they want a sign. Some reassurance that Jesus not only knows what is happening to them, but that Jesus cares and will do something about it. This is usually how we explore this story. We derive great comfort from it. Jesus comes to us in the storms of our lives, in our crises, in the death of a loved one, our struggles, times of feeling lost, at sea, lonely, afraid. He brings peace and calm. And it is good and true, and we cling to that promise that God is with us in all things. We believe that, we proclaim that. At the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, we are told that another name for the baby Jesus is to be Emmanuel. And we're even told very clearly what the word means, God with us. And then at the very end of the Gospel of Matthew, we hear Jesus promise, remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. These passages act like bookends to the Gospel of Matthew. At the beginning and at the end, we have before us the theme, God with us. But I wonder if there is another way to hear the story. Perhaps there is another way God speaks to us in the chaos of our times in this COVID era. What if we hear it this way? When Jesus says to Peter, you of little faith, maybe Jesus was asking, why, Peter, of all the people in the boat, were you the only one who doubted that it was me coming to aid you in the storm? Why didn't you have enough faith to stay seated in the boat with the others and let me come to you? Just wait in the boat and have some faith that I'll be with you. So maybe this is not a miracle story. Maybe this is a story about Peter abandoning those in need. Maybe, oh, you of little faith is not that Peter sank. Maybe those words were spoken because Peter wanted to get out of the boat. Maybe Jesus said, oh, you of little faith, because Peter abandoned his friends, abandoned those in need. He was a professional fisherfolk after all. He was skilled in navigating the lake. He would have experienced storms before. But he was needed by the community, by those in the boat, and he left them behind. Note that Jesus only rebukes Peter for the lack of faith. To the others seated in the boat, Jesus just comes, gets in the boat with them, and there is a great calm as the storm ceases. Well, Peter is often referred to in biblical commentaries as being a prototype disciple. This is not what we want in a prototype disciple. He left them for his own personal reasons. Was it his own ego, his impulsiveness? Whatever it was, he abandoned his friends. He's forgetting those he left behind. And maybe that is what we need to ponder in these storms going on around us now. With COVID-19, with a climate emergency, anti-racism rallies, murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, affordable housing crisis, an opioid crisis, stretched thin mental health services and support, and millions needing to access food banks, 1/3 of whom are children. Are we forgetting who is left behind? Is that what we've done as a society? Do we value individual freedom and choice so much that we fail to discern who is in the boat with us? Have we stepped out of the boat? Perhaps I'm taking liberty with the text, but I think this text is speaking to us in this way, in this context today. It is a poignant reminder of what it means to be disciples of Christ. Who have we left behind? Who have we left in the boat when we've gone off ahead? Amen.